the sermon that I prepared for you today, it is called, Who is Jesus? I'll do this in 3 parts. First, who is Jesus? The introduction, and then I will give you 5 possibilities from this passage we have read, the verses 7 to 35, and then I would ask you to draw your own conclusion. If you are familiar with the Bible, you know that it contains 4 biographies of the life and teachings of Jesus, and we are currently looking through one of them, the Gospel of Mark, and it's the shortest gospel. We're looking for clues to decide on the identity of Jesus. So the whole series is themed, Who is Jesus? But today I want to specifically address this question because the passage gives many, many clues about Jesus. When we ask the question, who is Jesus? Actually, 4 questions, right? The first question is, who did the onlookers think Jesus was? All those people around him, who do they think Jesus was? Who did Jesus think he was? That's the second question. Jesus would have no self-identity crisis. Some of us in modern 21st century Canada, we say we have identity crisis. I don't know who I am. My mother says, I'm stupid my whole life, so I think I'm stupid. My mother says I am ugly, and so my whole life I'm thinking I'm ugly. Or my father says I'm too short. No girl will like you, so I am always under this burden. I'm too short, and I go shorter and shorter. But Jesus had no problem about his self-identity. And I guess when we identify with Jesus, we take on the identity of Jesus. That's what we call Christians, Christ, small little Christ. We are Christians, little Christ. We will take on the identity of Jesus. So we need to know who Jesus was and who he thought he was. Now, the third question is, really, there's this writer, Mark. So he's writing about Jesus. So who did Mark think Jesus was? What was Mark's conclusion as we read him? And then finally, I think it has to come back to us. Who do we think Jesus is? Because if it's worth following, we follow him like the disciples. If it's not worth following, we have better things to do, right? It's a beautiful Sunday with the sun shining. Why are we here in church? Listening about Jesus. In this passage we've just read, there are 5 possibilities of who Jesus is. 5 possibilities. The first one is, of course, son of Joseph and Mary, the carpenter's son. Verses 21 and 31 tells us he's got a family. Secondly, he's the teacher. He's a miracle worker. Verses 7 and 9 tells us he's got disciples. Verse 10 says many people followed him because he was healing people. Possibility, he is a servant of Beelzebul or Satan. And that's what the teachers of the law, the scribes, say. That's who you are. You're possessed by Satan. Verses 22 and 23. Fourth possibility is a prophet of God. Verses 14 to 15, we see Jesus passing on the baton, so to speak. He appoints messengers of God, so he must be at least a prophet of God. And he appoints people to cast out demons. And verses 29 to 35, he talks about God. And so at least he must be a messenger of God. But the fifth possibility is, if prophet of God, really, could he be God himself? And verse 11, the evil spirits, as they leave the people they were possessing, they scream out, "You are the Son of God." They recognize Jesus as the Son of God. So is Jesus the Son of God? That looks at 1:21. First, son of Joseph and Mary. So in the passage we have just read, the first and most obvious identity, of course, is Jesus is the son of Joseph the carpenter of Nazareth, and Mary, the his mother, the wife of Joseph. And we get confirmation of this, of course, from Matthew chapter 1, verses 24 to 25. And that gospel, that passage, gives a detail of all the ancestry, the ancestors of Jesus to Matthew chapter 1. Mark tells us in chapter 6, verse 3, later on, when we come to it, we know that his brothers were identified: James, Joseph, Jude, and Simon. So this man had brothers, and he had sisters. The sisters are not identified. In those days, I guess, sons were, in my Chinese family, even in my generation, sons were more important than daughters. And I got to go to university, and my sisters never did. So, that was because we were a very poor family, and the family had to focus its resources, so they decided to bet on me, I guess. So Joseph's son, Mary's son, this is how the villagers of Nazareth saw Jesus. How did his brothers see him? In this passage, we're told very clearly his brothers saw him as out of his mind. He was crazy. This crazy man, he's insane. Maybe sometimes we say somebody's crazy, we don't really mean he's cuckoo, but he is, not like one of us. So it could be crazy in that sense, but crazy also as in really mentally ill. So it could be one of these, we don't know exactly, but they clearly didn't think much of Jesus. Why? Because he was speaking nonsense in their eyes, in their ears. This guy, this brother of ours, he is cuckoo. He is speaking nonsense. He needs protection. So while Jesus is preaching to rescue him, to remove him before the crowd laughed at him. You see, human beings are very cruel. They listen to you because they want to laugh. You're a comedian. You don't intend to be a comedian, but they look at you as a clown and they laugh. Politically, sometimes people look at some of the political leaders we have and say, those are clowns, and we laugh. They don't intend to make you laugh, but you laugh because you don't respect them. So maybe the brothers came to rescue Jesus before he was laughed at, mocked, and humiliated. Maybe before he gets beaten up. Because the crazy man says crazy things and then he may offend people and then he gets beaten up. So they came to rescue him. So was Jesus just a carpenter's crazy son? That's the first identity. Carpenter's crazy son. The second identity, Jesus, the teacher, the miracle worker. I think he's not the crazy son, because the crazy man would not have the wisdom Jesus had. Looking at his teachings as we read in Mark and the Gospels of John and Luke and so on, we do not see a man who is insane. He is very clear in his mind. He has very, very wise teachings. No, this is not a crazy man. He had great crowds following him. Verses 7 and 8 tells us these large crowds were following him from all over the place. And they came from outside Nazareth. Nazareth is a small little village. They heard about this carpenter's son who was speaking a lot of wonderful things and healing a lot of wonderful, terrible diseases. And so they came, verse 10, to be healed by him. Verse 8, they came from all over the place. This was an international crowd. Can you imagine a crazy man attracting an international crowd? Don't think so, yeah? Don't think so. Now, Now, Jerusalem, 126 kilometers. How far is that? They didn't have the TTC. They didn't have Air Canada. So what would they have done? They walked. And how long does it take to walk 126 kilometers? 4 or 5 days. They walked 4 or 5 days to come and see Jesus. Now he had disciples. Verses 7 and 9 tells us he had disciples. So he's a teacher, he's got followers, he's a guru. And so there were many people who saw Jesus not just as a miracle worker, healer, but also a teacher. And verses 23 and 24, verses 23 and 34, we are told that he's in the house, he's teaching, and people are sitting around him in a circle. Jewish teachers taught by sitting down. So when Jesus sat down, if you read the Gospels, whenever he said, and Jesus sat down, you know he's going to teach. Jewish teachers teach by sitting down. Canadian teachers teach by standing up, I think, mostly. Yeah. Okay. So he was teaching, and there were scribes who came all the way from Jerusalem. Now, these are richer people. They are the PhDs of the time. They probably had cars, right? Or maybe not your Honda Accord and not your Toyota Corolla, but they probably had carriages, horse carriages, maybe they are horses. So they came from Jerusalem all the way. Jesus. But we suspect they came to spy on him, maybe to catch his mistakes, and then to punish him for teaching the wrong things. So they probably had good intentions. Okay, put it that way. They may not necessarily have bad intentions. They wanted to make sure that this Jewish carpenter's son, who is not well educated, is not teaching rubbish. So they came to listen to him. But life is like that, isn't it? For many of us, sometimes your own family is more critical of you than outsiders. They call you crazy, they call you ugly, they call you stupid. And sometimes they could be very, very unkind. And we are not to be torn by the identities that our families impose on us. We look to Jesus. He is our identity. And Jesus has gone through this. His brothers call him crazy, but at one stage in one of the Gospels, he says, a prophet is not known in his own country. You are a great prophet of God. Your own people will not recognize you. It's just like that. Life is like that. Don't be burdened by that. The question we have is then, was Jesus just a great teacher and a great miracle worker? We need to look further into the evidence. The third conclusion, the third identity, the teachers of Israel. These are the scribes, the learned people, the PhDs, the professors. And they looked at Jesus and they said, Satan's servant, you are working for Satan. And the Jews are very serious, it's to them, they don't just go around accusing people of being satanic. They really must have believed Jesus was satanic. Why? Because he has got such power. They probably couldn't do it, but Jesus could. He was casting out demons. Verses 11 and 15 and 22, he's exorcising. He's looking at somebody and saying, okay, you're sick, I heal you. Oh, your problem is there's an evil spirit in you because maybe you dabbled with some sin. You sold your life to the devil. Whatever it is, you made a bargain with the devil. Do this for me and I'll do this for you. So Jesus cast out the demons, and the experts decided that he was using the power of Satan to do this because demons are powerful. They're more powerful than human beings for sure. Don't go try and cast out demons if you don't have the power. And because they refused that Jesus had the power of God, they said, therefore the second best is the power of Satan. And Jesus said, how ridiculous. How could Satan be casting out Satan? you just don't make sense, and you know it. You're PhDs. How could the Canadian Army shoot the Canadian Army? It doesn't happen. The Canadian Army tries not to shoot. Yeah, it always tells the world that they are a nation of helpers. They go and help. They're peacemakers, peacekeepers rather. So Canada goes to all the countries of the world where they are in strife, and they try and keep peace. That's the Canadian Army. But many armies of the world, the U.S. Army, they're always fighting. You don't see the U.S. Army fighting the U.S. Army, right? They always fight other armies. So why would Satan want to defeat the work of his own workers? He's sending out the demons to disrupt the world, and then he kills them, destroys them. Doesn't make sense. Why would he want to divide his own kingdom, Jesus says, and end his own rule? Right now, Paul tells us that the devil, and Jesus too tells us, the devil is temporarily in charge of the world, but he's already been defeated by the cross. Jesus on the cross defeated Satan, and now, eventually, Revelation tells us Satan and his demons will be thrown into the lake of fire for eternal punishment. But in the meantime, for a short time, God allows Satan to be kind of a ruler over human beings who reject God. So why would Satan want to end his own kingdom? He knows his kingdom is going to be ending when Jesus comes the second time. He's not going to be premature about it. So surely it was Satan's enemy that was attacking Satan's demons, not Satan attacking Satan. And therefore, it was a power much bigger than Satan. Come on, you need to acknowledge it. There's a power bigger than Satan's, and that is God, isn't it? Who could be more powerful than Satan? It's God. But you refuse to acknowledge this is God's work. That's why it's blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, blasphemy against God, when you credit Satan for God's work. So the fourth identity, prophet of God. If the power to defeat Satan came from God, then surely Jesus must be at least a messenger of God, a prophet of God, right? At least. And looking at the evidence that Mark sets down, there is evidence that he is not only casting out demons, he's got the power to do that. He seems to act like he has the authority to empower his disciples to cast out demons. So he not only does it himself, but he says, you can do it. And they did. So he's got the power to pass him the power. Wow. Verse 15, yeah? He's casting out demons, and he tells his disciples, I empower you to cast out demons. And then he's appointing apostles, which I said earlier on means messenger of God. So he's not only the one teaching God's word, he says, now I appoint you to be God's teachers also. Whoa. So who are you? It's like, I come here and say, hey, Rita, I'm going to make you ambassador to Singapore. I think you will do well in Singapore. Or maybe, no, I changed my mind. You go to Philippines, ambassador to Philippines. And I think I want you to be ambassador to India. I think India is good. Yeah, you speak Tamil and yeah, okay. A hero. By the way, can you please take over Emperor Akihito? I don't think I like him too much. If I'm doing that, I am crazy, right? I am crazy. Where do I find the power and the authority to do all that? I must be crazy. So maybe his brothers look at him and say, this guy is crazy. They had good reason, I suppose, but they only saw with a small, narrow picture. They didn't see the big picture. The big picture is Jesus was not just doing this. It happened when he says, you will cast out demons, and his disciples went up and cast out demons. And then he says, I will appoint you to teach. And this fisherman was poorly educated, Peter, John, James, they wrote the New Testament. They had the power and the authority and the ability that was given by God's empowerment. It wasn't just say so. It was reality. Jesus was doing something that no human being could be doing. And when the scribes accused him of using Satan's power, he charged them with blasphemy. Now, blasphemy is a sin against God, and it's an offense committed against God. And Jesus says, you call me a devil, you call me a servant of Satan, you blaspheme. That means, isn't there this implication that Jesus says, I'm God, you are offending me. And when you do that, you cannot be forgiven. And why? Jesus says, because they say he has an evil spirit. Their hearts were so hardened and their eyes so blind, they could not see that God was at work. Now, this is an even worse criticism than his brothers, right? His brothers just say he's crazy. The scribes say that he is possessed by Satan. He's evil to the core. So blasphemy is showing contempt for God, defaming God, and dishonoring him. And when Jesus laid this charge against the scribes, I think he was acting as a prophet of God, at least. But more than that, I think he was saying, I am God, because the last possibility is how we come to that conclusion. But before that, so Jesus was told that his mother and his brothers were waiting outside to take him home. Verse 32, what does he say? He says that my family is bigger than just these people. Maybe it sounds a bit rude to us modern people, right? Your family is outside. Tell them to go and wait. My family is here. So Jesus was declaring that his family was far wider than his family on earth in Nazareth. Because he says, my family is whoever does the will of God. Verse 35. I'm from God. Whoever does the will of God, he is my family. God's family is my family, not just my Nazareth family. So was Jesus a prophet of God then? And there are many people willing to say Jesus is a prophet of God. 2 billion Muslims acknowledge that. Because we look at the evidence earlier on about the prophet of God. And somehow we see somebody greater than a human being, greater than a prophet of God. The demons seem to think so, and the demons are living in the spiritual world. They know about God. They know about God's sentence on them, judging them to burn forever, and they don't want it to come. And so when they go out of the human being to possess, they scream, you are the Son of God. They scream and they shout to Jesus, you are the Son of God. That's why you're spoiling our party. Yeah, you're destroying our fun. The demons recognize that Jesus was more than a prophet. He is the Son of God. He has the nature of God. In verse 29, Jesus says that accusing him is equivalent to accusing God, right? Because when the scribes say, you are from Satan, Jesus, you are from Satan, Jesus says, you are defaming God when you say that. The Holy Spirit is God. God the Father is God. Jesus, the Son of God, is God. He has the nature of God. In appointing the apostles of God and empowering them to cast out demons, Jesus is not just acting as a prophet. As I mentioned earlier on, he was showing that he had authority to appoint messengers of God. So he acts like he's God. He's got a power to pass on to his disciples to cast out demons. He's acting like God. And by calling all those who do God's will as his family, wasn't Jesus saying that he's bigger than just human families? He is God. So what is your conclusion? Was Jesus a crazy man? Verse 20, son of Joseph and Mary? Or was he a teacher and miracle worker? There were many people, non-Christians. Mahatma Gandhi was one of those who really loved the teachings of Jesus and highly respected him. And in Singapore, I know that the first foreign minister, we had a very, very brilliant man. He was a Hindu. He could quote the Bible. He respected Jesus so much. Teacher and miracle, sure. Jesus is one of those. But I suppose for a Hindu, it is quite natural, right? Because there are 3 million gods, just one Lord. Yeah, okay, I can accept that. He too is God, but one of 3 million. Jesus' claim was not, I'm one of 3 million, I'm one and only one. So we have to think of it. Or do we think of him as crazy? And not only just crazy, but a servant of Satan, saying satanic things, evil things, doing evil work. And if not, then the contrast is then he is a prophet of God. So there are people who are on both sides, right? There are those who say, yeah, even today, some will say Jesus is evil. I have actually I heard people say and read on the internet about people saying that Jesus is so evil, I cannot accept him as God. So yeah, there are people still who would say Jesus is evil. And they give all kinds of reasons. Of course, we don't agree, but just like the scribes, they saw God's work and they described it as the devil's work. On the other hand, looking at the same evidence, there will be people who say, no, it's not from Satan, it's from God. So I've been a politician myself. I've been a lawyer. And when I speak, there's always the other side. And the judge sits and listens and see who's right. Yeah. So we are sitting as the judge and jury, and who is right? Is it the people saying that Jesus is from Satan, or is it people who say he's from God? Or best of all, the Christian's conclusion is Jesus is God himself. And Mark, in recording all these statements from the demons, you are the Son of God, and so on, and Jesus forgiving sin and claiming that offending him is offending God, quite clearly, Mark is also saying, this is God himself. And the gospel, he begins the gospel of Mark in chapter 1, we read, this is the good news of God. Mark was convinced Jesus is God himself. So what is your conclusion? And if you have any questions, ask till@gmail.com.